So I don't know if you've noticed, but there are like a lot of new 3D printers coming out on the market. And despite the fact that I'm literally declining over half of what manufacturers are offering to send me, over the last few months, I've racked up nearly a dozen of these latest, greatest 3D printers. And in this video, I'm gonna try and review them all. Let's get after it. So real quick, before we dive into the video, I wanna make a quick comment on the format and get the ethical stuff out of the way, because that's important. First of all, none of the brands that I'll be featuring in today's video have sponsored the video, but a couple of them are regular sponsors of the channel, though that won't stop me from sharing my honest opinions. Second, I want to point out that because there are other more in-depth reviews of all of these printers, like the wonderful reviews done by Aurora Tech Channel, which actually go into the deeper specs, my goal in this video is instead to share the highlights of each machine, what I love, what I don't, and an overall verdict or conclusion. If you want to then go deeper on any given machine, I encourage you to watch some of the more in-depth reviews out there, or just ask me your questions in the comments. And while I know that it might seem a little unfair for me to accept printers for review and then pack 7 or 8 of them into one video, the truth is my first responsibility and my priority is to provide value to you guys, my viewers who make this whole channel possible, and who've told me that you prefer comparison videos over straight up reviews. Not to mention, if I did a single review for each one of these printers, my entire channel would be nothing but reviews for the next 3 months or more, at which point some of these machines would no longer be relevant or interesting at all. Finally, I actually predict that because this video will appeal to a much wider audience rather than just the small subset of people interested in a specific printer, this video actually will garner more views and more exposure for each of these brands. But hey, let me know in the comments below if you like this format or if not. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's talk about some printers. And keep in mind, if you're not interested in a specific one of these machines, you can always just use the chapters below to skip around. Let's start things off with a machine that has been shrouded in controversy after YouTuber Clow42's discoveries caused Qidi to pull their entire line of new Clipper printers off the market. Fortunately, they really took his feedback to heart because the unit that I received was free from that specific issue, though not perfect as you're about to see. The X-Max 3 is obviously a large format printer with a 330 squared print bed area, active chamber heating, clipper, and more. And let me just tell you right off the bat, this thing is phenomenal. There's a lot to love about the Qidi X-Max 3. First of all, it's running a full unrestrained version of Clipper with a super easy to use touchscreen interface built on top of it. Second, the large build volume is a welcome change over most of the other Bambu Lab clones out there like the Creality K1. Third, the quality of the prints, whether PLA, ABS, or even exotic materials, is some of the best I've ever seen. In fact, this thing prints a 16-minute benchy that, quite frankly, rivals the quality of a 1-hour 40-minute benchy printed on a Prusa Mark III's Plus. It's that good. Bed leveling works phenomenally. The hot end, which is, to be honest, heavily inspired by Bambu Lab, flows incredibly well, and the printer is well thought out in terms of ergonomics and usability, with things like handles and an easy-to-use lid right on top. This thing, right out of the box, reliably produces phenomenal prints in any material you throw at it, and it quickly became one of the printers that I just set and forget as it churns out beautiful prints over the entire weekend. With all that said, the more I used the X-Max 3, the more I discovered a lot of little annoyances that really took away from the experience. First of all, in order to change the hot end, which you'll have to do if you want to print abrasive materials, you need to take apart basically the entire tool head, including the back cover, a process which takes 20 minutes or more, even if the printer isn't tucked away on a shelf. I quickly resorted to just changing the nozzles, which thankfully are slightly shorter Volcano V6 nozzles, instead of swapping out the entire hot end. Second, although the machine runs a full open source version of Clipper, I discovered that you, the user, cannot freely upgrade or modify it without damaging it. I made the mistake of simply upgrading the printer to the latest versions of Clipper and Moonraker, only to discover that I'd bricked the entire machine. And when I spoke to support to see how I could just roll back the software and flash the old one, They informed me that they'd actually have to ship out an entirely new eMMC because there was no way to roll it back myself. That's absolutely insane, and while I really love the touchscreen interface and ease of use improvements that Qidi has made to Klipper, to me, nothing is worth trading the ability to literally upgrade the printer on my own if, say, I want to install things like Octo Everywhere or just switch to mainsail to suit my own needs. Additionally, I definitely would have appreciated it if Qidi included a camera. Now, I understand that this may be really hard to do on a printer with a heated chamber, but at $1,000 and with a build volume this big that could take days to print, I would expect to be able to monitor my prints like I can on my Bambu Lab X1 Carbon. Finally, there's the design. The Qidi X-Max 3 isn't a bad-looking printer, but it definitely doesn't win any awards when placed next to the Creality K1 or the Bambu Lab X1 Carbon. The housing seems bigger than it needs to be, and the use of plastic all over instead of glass and aluminum really cheapens the look and feel of the machine. Overall, I give the Qidi X-Max 3 a resounding 2 thumbs up though, because if Qidi is willing to just change the software or provide regular updates of their own modified version that allows users to take a little more control, I think this printer will be a huge hit. If you're one of the many people out there waiting around for a bigger version of the X1 Carbon, well, wait no more, because this machine ticks all the boxes. And with a $29 webcam and an Octo Everywhere subscription, you basically will want for nothing. As always, and with every one of these printers, link in the description if you are willing to support the channel. No, you didn't accidentally switch to Ivan Miranda's channel. You're just meeting the Comgrow T500. And no, I'm not going to be trying to move this thing again to record on my main set because it weighs more than I do. With a 500mm cube build volume, this machine puts other huge 3D printers like the AnyCubic Kobra Max and the Elegoo Neptune 3 Max to shame. But is it any good? First of all, I have to say that despite being a bed slinger, this thing moves. It does so by having a ridiculously rigid frame with CNC'd metal brackets and by running Klipper with input shaping. In other words, while the bed itself is heavier than insert a Yo Mama joke here, this thing manages to churn out a very respectable 25-minute benchy with surprisingly good quality. What's more, I love the use of open source, easy to modify software such as Klipper Screen and the massive touchscreen LCD. It also has a Volcano-style hot end, but we'll come to that in a second, and generally has very solid, high-quality builds. With that said, there are a few things about the Comgrow T500 that really disappointed me. First, it ships with a comical 0.4mm nozzle, and while a few extra nozzles are included, the maximum is this 0.8mm nozzle. I think that with a printer of this size, it really makes sense to tune it on larger nozzles because printing this big with a 0.4 nozzle is, well, it's just silly. But here's the thing, even if you do try to swap to a 1.0 or 1.2mm nozzle, you're in for a bad time. First, the printer uses a strangely shaped Volcano nozzle rather than the standard V6 ones I'm familiar with, and the housing of the tool head is so close to the actual print surface that if you do use a slightly shorter nozzle, your print head will scrape along the prints constantly. What's more, the heater block seems to be inadequate for what I was trying to do because I was severely limited by flow rates, and if I wanted to print with any reasonably fast speed, then I had to stick to the 0.8 nozzle. This could be improved by putting a CHT nozzle on there, but as I said, the tight clearance of the print head versus the tool head really prevented me from using any of the CHT nozzles that I own. And when I spoke to the folks at Comgrow, they told me that they were still working on tuning pressure advance for 1.2mm nozzles, so that was a real bummer. Personally, I feel like if you're going to sell a printer this big, especially one where the headline feature is high-speed large printing, then you really should make sure that your hot end can exceed 22mm cubed per second. To be honest, I haven't been able to get really very many successful prints off of this at the time of writing, except for the 3D benchy I printed and hopefully this large trash can. I'm quite sure that if I spent more time on this thing and tuned things like pressure advance, speeds, bed leveling, and my profiles in Orca Slicer, I could get this thing to print really well. But considering I have plenty of other printers that are nearly as big and just work right out of the box without all these hassles, I really can't justify spending any more time on getting this thing to work any better. Third, there's the knobs on top. Don't get me wrong, it makes sense to have a way to manually move the Z, but by having the knobs stick out that far, they've made a printer that is impossible to find a home for even more impossibler. And I honestly have no idea where I'm going to put this thing moving forward. Fourth, and this is a small one, but these cheapy metallic rail guards are really not great. They bunch up and one even fell off on me, which for a printer of this price point and general build quality felt like a bit of an oversight. But to be honest, Comgrow did let me know that they're making a lot of changes to the printer before it goes into production. And from what I understood of the obviously auto-translated email, that's going to be one of them. At the time of this recording, I unfortunately don't know the price for this printer, so I can't comment on the price or the value, but it's really, really hot and loud in this room, so why don't we just move on? The AnkerMake M5C. AnkerMake's new entry-level 3D printer geared towards beginners with no technical savvy. I'll be honest, this printer gave me a lot of headaches when I recently did some sponsored content for AnkerMake, but after watching other people's reviews, I'm actually convinced that something small was wrong with mine, such as a defective hot end fan, which caused all the issues. And so I'm going to try and judge this as if I didn't have persistent clogging, as I showed in the sponsored video. There's no two ways about it. The build quality, design, fit, and finish of the AnkerMake M5C is top notch. This printer legitimately looks more like a polished home electronic device from someone like Apple or Bose than it does a hobbyist 3D printer. It's just beautiful. I love the speed, and the prints that I was able to get off of it were acceptable, though not earth-shattering in quality. What's more, their apps, both desktop and mobile, are easy enough that your mom could legitimately use them, and I, for one, really appreciate that AnkerMake is trying to make 3D printing more approachable to a broader spectrum of people. Needless to say, I encouraged AnkerMake to look into the hot end fan and the issues that I was having, and to their credit, they were very quick to schedule a Zoom call with me later this week to diagnose why my specific unit was clogging so much. So I'm really confident that they will get to the bottom of that before they start shipping machines. But beyond that, I would say that there honestly isn't too much that I would really change about this machine, considering what it's meant to be. Sure, it would be nice if I would be able to switch out the firmware when I outgrow the beginner suite included with it, but then that would kind of defeat the overall purpose of this printer to be a dead simple one that a beginner literally couldn't possibly screw up. Now, I could also complain about the fact that there's no touchscreen or camera, but again, that would reflect a cognitive dissonance with this machine and what it's trying to be. So let's get to the conclusion or the verdict. Look, AnkerMake's M5C is not the most advanced 3D printer. If you're a 3D printing enthusiast already and you want a great all-around printer that's going to grow with you as you mature in this hobby, this isn't it. But if you're looking to get someone like your nieces and nephews, your parents, or even some of your friends into the hobby in an easy and foolproof way, this is probably the best 3D printer on the market to do it. And for that, I give them a hearty round of applause. And as always, link in the description if you want to support the channel. On the absolute opposite end of the spectrum, we have this LDO Voron 0.2 kit, a 3D printer that you literally need to build from a bucket of parts, including printing out all of the parts yourself in ABS. Let me be clear here. The only people who buy or should buy a Voron kit are those who really enjoy the process of building and tuning 3D printers. Because if you want a high-performance machine that just works out of the box, this isn't it. In fact, it's at this point that I actually need to thank my Discord members, Vlad and Jacques, who actually helped me build the next two printers on a live stream because I simply wouldn't have had the time to do it otherwise. These things take like 40 to 50 hours each to build. But if you're into that kind of thing, it's a really enjoyable process. As you've probably heard before, if you've watched videos about Voron kits, the LDO kit is the one to beat, and the quality not only of the parts themselves, but also of the instructions and supplemental manuals is really second to none, or at least so I thought, but more on that in a second. LDO makes a phenomenal, all-around great kit, and where they really excel, in my opinion, is in including all the latest and greatest upgrades and modifications that you might want to do. Pico-bilical PCB, no-drop nuts, Kirigami bed, RGB LEDs, They're on top of all of it, and they keep their kits up to date with all the latest, greatest bells and whistles that you might possibly want to do. The LDO kit, which I outfitted with a Slice Engineering Mosquito Magnum that was provided to me free of charge, prints beautifully, and the quality of the parts is phenomenal. LDO has chosen to use the more expensive but better options when it comes to electronics, such as including an E3D Revo, the BTT SKR Pico control board, and they even recommend using an authentic Raspberry Pi Zero. The instructions, even when they differ from the official Voron guide, are great. I have no complaints about the kit or the printer itself, to be honest. With all that said, I hate to say that as we were building this kit alongside the next printer I'm going to be talking about, there were a few things that really stood out to us. First, LDO's choice of packing all the hardware each in individual baggies, while more convenient than having no organization whatsoever, is really not the best way to make them easy to find during the build, and a simple labeled organization box would have gone a long way. Second, and this is really my only complaint, the price. Don't get me wrong, LDO has earned their name as the top of the line when it comes to Voron kits, and so they deserve to command a premium price. But this kit, which is priced at $649 from most retailers, typically comes without a Raspberry Pi or any printed parts. And that is a lot of money, especially when compared to the next printer on our list. Oh, and maybe just one more thing, and this isn't an indictment of the LDO kit itself, but rather of the Voron mini stealth burner design as a whole. This thing has the cooling capability of an asthmatic baby angel blowing through a straw. If you're planning on buying the 0.2 kit for printing speed benchies or small PLA objects, think again, because you'll need significant amounts of auxiliary cooling to even come close to the speeds of something like the Qidi X-Max 3 or the Bambu Lab X1 Carbon, simply because of the lackluster cooling capability of this design. If you're looking to build a Voron 0.2 and you want the latest, greatest version with all the bells, whistles, upgrades, perfect documentation, and tried and true name, look no further than the LDO Motors kit. I can say with complete confidence that you will be extremely happy with this kit, and if you don't have time to mess around, this is the way to go. With that said, unless you're already able to print ABS parts on your own, you may need to buy either CNC or printed parts, as well as a Raspberry Pi Zero, and all that can get expensive pretty fast. As always, links in the description if you wish to support the channel. All right, let's take a quick break because I do have to let you know about this video's sponsor, and that's a longtime sponsor of this show, PCBWay. Don't let the name fool you. PCBWay has you covered for any kind of fabrication that you need, whether it be injection molding, sheet metal manufacturing, metal 3D printing, CNC machining, industrial scale 3D printing, or, of course, PCBs. Every single person that I've referred to PCBWay has been blown away by their quality and service, and it's easy to see why. Their prices are incredible, their service is even better, and their lead times are incredibly fast. So to check them out and get a sign-on bonus for your first order, and of course, support the channel in so doing, hit the link in the description below. All right, let's get back to this video. Some of you may have heard of the Siboor Voron kits because Mantic really did a video on the cheapest Voron kit on the market. But fear not, because Siboor has grown up and they are now aggressively moving into the more premium market segment that has historically been dominated by LDO motors. The kit I was provided was 100% complete, including a complete set of CNC'd aluminum parts and all the printed parts for anything that you would need printed out of eSun ABS, as well as a hot end, a control board, and more. But how good is it? First of all, throughout the build process, Jacques, Vlad, and myself were all simply blown away by the quality, not only of the CNC'd parts, but also of the 3D printed parts, and even of the packaging and the general organization. We particularly loved how Siboor organized all the hardware into a box with a map, because while this might seem like a really small thing, it saved a ton of time on the build, which is already an incredibly long build process with these machines. What's more, the ingenious idea of using CNC machined parts, which Siboor has modified in certain places to make use of the capabilities of metal makes this machine heavier and more rigid, and I was actually surprised to see that the max acceleration of the unit on one of the axes was actually twice that of the LDO kit, though ultimately the recommended acceleration with the right settings was actually about the same. Additionally, Siboor had mostly great documentation with images explaining things like the wiring and sample files right on their GitHub. But really, what I loved most about this kit is that it includes absolutely everything, from the Fadus Dragon hot end to the control board, all the way up to the printed and CNC'd parts, all in one box for the incredible price of just $635. Oh, and if you want it with 3D printed parts, it's actually only $515. That's insane, considering the price of the LDO kit, which again, doesn't include the Raspberry Pi or any of the printed parts, is significantly more. With that glowing review, you might be surprised to hear that there are actually quite a few things that I would change on the Siboor kit. First of all, I had a lot of difficulty with the Fly Gemini board they sent, ranging from my first one actually being a dud to issues with connectivity and configuring the files. It actually took a lot of work and a lot of help from 4 or 5 wonderful different people at Siboor to actually get this machine working, largely because my shooting schedule just didn't allow for me to spend all of the time to figure it out myself. Additionally, the kit that I received was missing a lot of the upgrades like the Kirigami bed, Pico Bilical PCB, and more. However, Siboor actually let me know before recording that they are going to be adding those upgrades shortly and increasing the price by really only a very nominal amount. If and when they do, it's going to make their kit extremely competitive with the LDO ones in terms of value. But one other thing that I would like to see them change is the documentation. Though they do give a very clear guide for wiring and they attempt to show the differences between their machine and the official Voron guide in the same way that LDO does that I love so much, there are still a lot of confusing inconsistencies, such as places where V0.1 shows up or updated guides which show the parts that are going to come out on the new kits but aren't included on the old kits just yet. It becomes really difficult to understand which guide you can trust and which one is for the kit that you have. All this is pretty easy to fix. I mean, they could just solve it by forking the instructions and giving users a clear guide to understand which set of instructions they should actually follow based on their purchase date. This is another phenomenal Voron kit, and it well exceeded my expectations based on what I'd heard about Siboor. If you're on a budget and you want the best value for the money, even if it means that you need to spend a little more time troubleshooting, figuring things out, or asking for help on Discord, this is the machine to get. In the end, I do think that you're going to have a more polished, finished printer thanks to the CNC machine parts, and I have no doubt, based on just how attentive and responsive the Siboor team has been to me, that after this video comes out, they're going to be improving everything I mentioned, from the guides to the hardware. So I would say that this kit is giving the LDO kit a real genuine run for its money at something like 2/3 the price. As always, yes, link in the description if you want to support the channel. Recently, AnyCubic sent over the Kobra 2, an ultra-fast entry-level 3D printer, which they wanted me to feature in an upcoming sponsored spot. But what do I think of it? First off, I'll say that the quality of this printer is good. It's solid, it's well made, and it is a breeze to set up. Also, it features AnyCubic's new LeviQ automatic leveling system, which, given that I think they named it for me, must be super awesome. Setup, as I said, was a breeze. No complaints there. It also prints fast, apparently. I wouldn't know, because after setting it up and realizing all the things that it was missing, like dual Z motors and a few other things I'm going to mention, I actually didn't bother continuing. And I just let AnyCubic know that I would rather include some of their other printers in their upcoming ad spot. Here's why. I think that this printer at $259 would have been a great one maybe 6 or 8 months ago. The prospect of giving a fast, well-made printer to entry-level users at a bargain basement of a price, it's a good idea. I support that. Unfortunately for AnyCubic, since this printer came out, the Sovol SV07 also came out, and then had its price slashed to just $269. Unlike the SV07, this printer does not feature Wi-Fi connectivity, meaning that you need to transfer files using an SD card. Unlike the SV07, this printer does not use open source hardware like Clipper or Clipper Screen, or if it does, you can't access and modify it. So basically, this machine is $10 less than the SV07, but much less convenient and much less expandable. And for that reason, I told AnyCubic that I simply could not promote it to you guys. To their credit, they fully understood where I was coming from, and they let me know about some future, more competitive models that they'll be sending over, which apparently I'm gonna feel much more comfortable giving my seal of approval. So hit that subscribe button if you wanna see those when they come out. As I said before, I unfortunately cannot recommend this printer, at least not at this price. If it were meaningfully cheaper than the SV07, I could at least recommend it for the ultra budget conscious consumer or anyone who literally doesn't want Wi-Fi connectivity on their printer for security reasons or some such thing. But as it stands today, unfortunately, the AnyCubic Kobra 2 is a casualty of the ultra brutal competitive landscape in 3D printing right now. Recently, I had the distinct privilege of introducing the world to the new Bambu Lab P1S, but because I was on a super tight deadline to get the video out first, I wasn't able to go too in-depth with the machine, and I actually overlooked some pretty important things that I want to correct in this video. So let's go a little bit deeper into all that right now. And by the way, you'll notice I don't have the printer here for a couple reasons. One, it didn't fit on the table, but two, it's actually pretty much printing 24/7 ever since I got it, and I didn't want to stop it, which is a little bit of a spoiler for the verdict that's coming up. The Bambu Lab P1S shares most of what I love about the entire Bambu Lab lineup. The industry-shifting performance, the easy-to-use software, the instant setup, the seamless integration with their AMS system, a beautiful mobile app experience, blah, 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 blah. You've heard it all before. But the P1S also has some new things that I especially love, including the gold textured PEI plate, which offers phenomenal bed adhesion on a wider range of materials than the lackluster, cool, and engineering plates of the X1C. What's more, I personally think that the P1S's gunmetal finish is more attractive than any of the other Bambu Lab lineup. To be honest, I wouldn't change anything about the P1S because I understand that the differences between it and the X1 Carbon that I don't like need to exist to achieve the price that they've achieved. With that said, when I compare the P1S to my two X1 Carbons, there are a few things that I definitely miss, some of which weren't apparent to me when I first did that original overview video. First, I'm not going to surprise any of you when I say that I don't like that clicky button display and I miss the beautiful touchscreen. Second, at the time of recording, I didn't actually realize that the P1S does not feature hardened steel extruder gears or nozzle, making it less suited but not completely incompatible with abrasive filaments like carbon fiber nylon. What's more, the max build plate temperature of 100 degrees Celsius means that you are going to be a little more limited on those advanced materials. Finally, I had no idea that the P1S, due to its inferior processing power, lacks both spaghetti detection and smooth remote viewing, both of which I actually genuinely miss. And while the 720p camera is fine, it definitely isn't as nice or high resolution or high frame rate for things like time lapses as the 1080p1 is in its big brother. Notably missing from this list of things that I am missing is the micro LiDAR, which frankly, I don't miss at all on the P1S. Look, I said it in my original review and nothing that I've discovered since then has changed my mind one bit. I think this is probably the absolute best all-around printer to get for anyone who doesn't have money to burn. At $699, it has everything you need, and it will even allow you to dip your toes into advanced filaments and even abrasives. Sure, if you plan to print carbon fiber reinforced filaments all day, get the X1 Carbon. But for everyone else, I really think you can't go wrong with the P1S. Seriously. And here, again, I probably don't need to say it, but link in the description if you want to support the channel. All right, we have come to the end of our list, but I can't let you go without talking about the all-new Sovol SV07 Plus, the latest release from longtime sponsor Sovol. As you all know by now, I really love the SV07, and I wasn't alone. And so in true Sovol fashion, the SV07 Plus is a scaled up version of the SV07 with a lot of little tweaks and upgrades. But is it any good? As with all these Sovol machines I've used, Setup and assembly with this machine were an absolute breeze. Build quality is, as always, exceptional. Except for a little issue where print start and print end macros are always incorrectly named on these printers, the printer just worked right out of the box. They even include a simple setup guide for configuring the printer, including bed meshing and even input shaping, all of which takes just minutes, and which will give you much higher quality prints. The bed size at 300 by 300 by 400 is a great trade-off between being able to print massive things on the one hand, but also actually being able to store this printer in a real home on the other. Oh, and it prints fast. Just as fast as its little brother, and with equally good quality for a bed slinger. Or quite frankly, for any printer, regardless of price point. Now, once again, I'll commend Sovol for sticking with the base, unbastardized versions of open source software like Klipper, Fluid, and Klipper Screen, and allowing you, the user, to modify it to their heart's content without breaking anything. I love these machines because Sovol doesn't try to corral you into using their own slicer like Creality or AnkerMake, and their approach seems to be to give you the hardware and make the software work with whatever stack you want to use. While that might be scarier for new users than just downloading the approved slicer from Creality's website, in my opinion, it makes for a much better experience for hobbyists and enthusiasts who want to make the printer their own and let it grow with their skills. I also love that the SV07 came with an extra build surface because one of the few issues that I've had with my SV07 is that the gold finish on the Sovol logo actually peeled off after a while on both sides of the surface. I complained about this on the SV07 and I'll complain about it here too. I don't like how the filament sensor is mounted, or rather dangling, on the top of this printer. It probably won't bother you if you don't have racks and racks of printers, but for me, the first thing I do is remove the filament spool holder on all my printers so I can fit more of them on my shelves. Now, this is an easy enough fix. I mean, I would love to see Sovol just provide a STL right on the printer's files to print your own bracket and mount the filament holder somewhere else. In fact, instead of waiting around, I might just get around to doing it myself and uploading it to printables. But as you can probably tell, I'm really hunting for things to complain about here because this printer, it's honestly damn good for the price. If you want a big, fast printer and you can't justify spending $1,000 on an X-Max 3, this would be my recommendation. And considering that it actually prints just as well and just as fast as the SV07, I actually might recommend this over that, since it will be more versatile and allow you to print more, bigger things. In short, this printer is great and I recommend it with confidence. So check out the link in the description if you wish to support the channel. By the way, I have an idea for a video on the top big 3D prints, but I'm not sure how many of you have larger format 3D printers. So please let me know in the comments below if that's a video you'd like to see. So there you have it, all the latest 3D printers that I've agreed to test out, complete with what I love and what I don't. Thanks so much to all the manufacturers featured in this video for sending me these printers free of charge to review. Thanks again to my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. And thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and subscribing. I would love to know if this is a format of video you enjoyed and if you'd like to see me do any more of them in the future. In any case, I appreciate you all, and although that is all for this week, I'll see all of you on the next layer.